This is episode 104 of the Death to Tyrants podcast.
The crushing weight of the tyrant's passage had left nothing unmarked.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquids, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
What is going on, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Death to Tyrants podcast. You already know this, but in case you didn't, as always, I'm your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Austin, Texas. And man, we've been doing all these episodes on various aspects of this lockdown, the pandemic, and everything surrounding it, really. We're trying to hit it from various angles. And it's just as I read and watch news outlets, and you see people post on social media, my brain is overflowing with stuff I don't even want in there. Unfortunately, maybe I hope you're not, but at least I hope you are in the fact that you can relate to me that my social media feed is just overrun with idiocy on a daily basis. I don't know, does that speak poorly upon my friends, or does that mean that a lot of us red-pilled people are just a minority? And so you're always faced, once you can kind of see things for how they are, you're going to have a hard time when other people that can't see things for how they are shoot their mouths off, and they're always so loud and vocal about all of this stuff. So all that being said, every time I come upon one of my guests' articles, and my guest is Peter Van Buren, and he writes over at theamericanconservative.com. Every time I come upon one of his articles, especially lately, because I need this, it's like a relief. And I find myself laughing out loud, pointing at my screen, basically, hallelujah, towards the heavens. Thank you, Peter, for saying this stuff. My God, there's so much idiocy out there, and Peter is so good. He's clever, and he always has valid points and brilliant insights. I know you guys remember him from being on the show just a month or two ago. And so I brought him on. The last 3 articles he's put out, of course, I'll link to them in the show notes page. They're all kind of surrounding the COVID moment, the lockdown, and some current event type things involving this moment, including even some Joe Biden stuff. One of the main themes that I really loved is, do you guys, if any of you have a rescue dog, I know you're going to know this, or if your friends have one, it's a big deal here in Austin. Lots of rescue dogs going to people. And you ever notice how scared they are over the weirdest things? Yeah, whether it be like the way you fold up a newspaper or throw something loudly away in the trash, and they just flip out. And, not like regular dogs where it's just fireworks that set them off, no pun intended, but over the weirdest things. And I think you guys listening to this probably have figured out by now where I'm going with this. Do we not have a nation full of people like that right now? Just walking outside can scare some of your neighbors at this point. And they certainly don't want to go to work, many of them. If you've got unemployment coming in and it's probably close to what you were already making, well, shit, then why work? At that point, you can just stay at home and virtue signal online for everyone else to do what you do. It kind of levels the playing field to the lowest possible level, and that's what a lot of people love. And so I think a lot of my listeners out there understand that and hate that part of it, because I know I do. So we get into that. We talk about the lockdown wars, debating pandemic measures in a failed state. And I love this headline. I laughed out loud when I saw Peter's article on this. Joe Biden could sexually harass someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it. I think the left's being a little bit hypocritical. I know this is going to shock you once again. They might not be the most consistent group of people out there. I know your mind's blown from that. So I'll quit wasting your time. I'm going to bring Peter right on in here real quick. You guys remember him from before. He served in the U.S. Department of State for 24 years, including a year in Iraq as a team leader for 2 providential reconstruction teams. He's written some books. He's written a ton of articles. And like I said, I love all of them. They always make me laugh and nod at paragraph after paragraph. I'll quit wasting your time. Back on the show is Peter Van Buren. Peter, thank you for being here, man. How are you?
It's a pleasure, Buck. Thank you. I'm doing well.
Yeah, well, despite the craziness, I suppose. Are you in New York City? I can't remember.
Yes, I am. I live in New York City, and luckily I'm on the 12th floor of an apartment building. The COVID zombies have made it up to about the 8th floor, but our barricades are holding there. In fact, after the show, I've got to take my turn down there with a baseball bat. But the de Blasio Brigade has come at us, but we've been able to hold them back so far.
So, I assume there's chance of stay inside, because that's what I keep hearing.
Yes, stay inside, stay alive, because they're not smart enough to know what they're looking for are our brains. So they're just kind of repeating what they've heard on TV.
Well, I have to say this to the people listening. Some of this stuff, you're flooded with articles and unfortunately with horrible takes from people I know on social media. And so when I stumble upon Peter's articles, it's like a moment of escape where I get to smile, laugh, and go, yes, this is what I've been thinking. Thank God someone else is saying this and thinking these things. Why are the most insane voices the loudest through moments like this? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have actually, and I think there's a variety of things. I mean, the first is that the mainstream media has come to the conclusion that their purpose in life is to defeat Donald Trump in the election, and they're like children. They're frustrated in their inability to sort of make progress on that. They went through Russiagate. They went through the whole thing with the Ukraine. They've gone off on little tangents with the emoluments clause and whatever the sort of outrage of the day is. He doesn't have a mask on. He's doing this. He's doing that. And they're just deeply frustrated. And like children, they can't express their frustration in any other way than allowing it to sort of build up inside them and then sort of just splash out inappropriately. And, we forgive that in 2- and 3-year-olds. We tend to be a little less forgiving in teenagers, but we seem to have internalized it as a media almost a technique that if you can't exaggerate it to the point of absurdity, why bother? For example, the states, Georgia, Florida, in particular, Texas, where you guys are, have so-called opened up in some cases for about 2 weeks. And I've got all these articles that I've been saving where the media had made these incredible predictions of mass deaths and hashtags for Florida morons and what have you. And of course, none of that has proven to be even remotely true, but they're just continuing it anyway. And it is this awful sense that the crazy folks have taken over and they just don't know what else to do other than to express this frustration by banging the pots and pans on the floor or whatever it is they think will relieve the stress, when in fact they're sort of whipping it up in themselves. It's almost a cyclic thing, whereas they try to release the stress from the fact that the impeachment failed. They have to come up with something new, and goodness, here's the virus. And they've created themselves this logic trap where they're essentially rooting for more people to die so that they can own the orange man. They can't kind of process the reality that their point of view depends on fellow Americans dying horrible deaths from this virus, just so that they can say they were right all along. It's a conundrum, and I don't know that they can resolve it, and they're just lashing out.
Yeah, and there's this weird urge to politicize everything.
Everything. Yeah.
Going outside is politicized now, and taking a walk. If I've got people writing on social media that this lady was too close to me today and I yelled at her. It's like, what the hell is going on?
Now, do people wear masks in Austin, where you're located?
It is not required.
Yeah.
It's recommended, and I would say probably 70% of the people are doing that.
Yeah. Now, here in New York, it's very close to 100%. I don't know if it's mandated or not, to be honest with you, but they don't need to mandate it because everyone's doing it anyway. And if there's an odd person who forgets his mask or takes it off, or I mean, for example, sometimes glasses fog up or what have you, it just brings out this absolute hall monitorism. It reminds me of those kids, Danny Betzel, if you're out there listening, I remember you sitting in the hallway asking his fellow students for if they have their passes and things like that. And it's like, why are you doing this? We're fellow students. And, I wear the mask generally because it's just easier if I'm just going out with the dog or something. I really am not necessarily at 6:30 a.m. wanting to focus on geopolitics and the left-right conundrum here in America kind of thing. I just want the dog to pee so I go back to bed. And so I have the mask on, and one day I forgot it, and one of the neighbors just laid into me as if I had sacrificed his child on the altar to the Norse god Gore or something. It's like, dude, you've got to unwind a little bit from this, and it wasn't going to happen. We're faced with this kind of odd madness in America. I've given up on a lot of things like social media for the most part. I still play around a little on Facebook, but I've given up on things like Twitter or any of the more immediate interactive back and forth, because it just simply brings out the most terrible sides of the most terrible people. And it eventually forces me to ask questions about us as a nation. If this is who we are, if this is how we are, how can we ever expect to look at serious problems? And there are serious problems. How can we ever expect to reach the kinds of compromises that are inherent in our system? Our system is designed to create friction that generates compromises. That's why the powers of the government are all divided up. And yet we're failing miserably at the task the founders set out for us, to try to maintain that sense of compromise, to disagree without being disagreeable.
Yeah, and I thought I keep hearing the crazies say we're all in this together, yet then their message, other than that, is quite the opposite.
Absolutely. We're all in this together, except for you inbred, redneck, slack-jawed yokels outside of the cities with good coffee shops. You people should die horrible deaths choking on your own virus-laden saliva or something like that. And we're not in this together in that sense at all. More seriously, because I mean that kind of hatred of people other than yourself is sadly not as new as we'd hope it would be. And the idea that the coastal people look down on the rest of the country, again, is not particularly new. It didn't work real well for the Democratic Party in 2016. It's not going to work well for them in 2020. But lessons will be learned eventually on that. I think it's more the way that this has exposed deeper divisions within us, particularly economic inequalities, which is a subject that I've written about for many, many years. And now with the virus, it's been exposed. I certainly am not using that as a lead in to here's how the virus is going to help sell my personal political ideas. That's more of a democratic thing, when whatever goofy stuff didn't work for them in the primary is being repackaged as part of the solution to the virus. Student loan repayments and free this and giveaways of that. Not at all. I'm just pointing out that the problems of the virus are the problems of our society. and you're not going to fix one without the other. My daughter taught for several years in the South Bronx here in New York, which is one of the worst neighborhoods this side of I can't think of a worse place right now. It's poor, it's violent. People don't have enough of anything other than drugs and gang signatures, and she started off like many young people with all that enthusiasm about changing the world, or at least changing her students. And she sadly came to the conclusion very quickly that you can't change the school until you can change the neighborhood. And that task was far beyond any person's ability. And that's the same thing here with the virus. We're just seeing the problems in America brought forward in the guise of this virus, but anyone who pretends those problems are going to go away when the virus dries up is probably foolish.
Yeah, it's kind of, and I no pun intended here, but I keep saying it. It's unmasked a lot of people. In moments like this, I thought the 2016 election kind of did that, and now I've seen people I know that I thought, he's kind of got an authoritarian leaning temperament, and some of his politics lean towards that way. And now it's like, oh no, that's exactly what he is. He wants drones to fly over Austin and make sure we stay in our house. And I've seen people like that bitching about who's going to enforce this lockdown. No, if the cops aren't going to enforce it, what's the point of it? Yep.
Yeah. Well, the drones are only an interim step till the implants are actually ready. But Jeff Bezos explained that they really want to sell everyone, the drone stuff first, and then upgrade you to the implant, so they get two sales out. It's like getting you to buy the CD after you bought the vinyl album, and then tricking you to buy the vinyl again.
Yes.
I'm not smart enough to have those kind of jobs, but you're right, absolutely right. I mean, if you had asked me, I don't know, 10 years ago, if these calls for authoritarianism were going to be coming from the left, I would have laughed at you. I mean, I would have wondered what was in the water, because we were all looking at authoritarianism from the right. It was, the fascist Republicans. It was Ronald Reagan. It was George Bush who was going to do all these things, and that we would consider authoritarian in terms of controlling our lives. And yet somebody hit the fast forward button, and we woke up in 2020 where it's our left of center leadership. Again, I live in New York with a fully democratic government that wants more, and a democratic left of center populace who's demanding more. It reminds me in many ways of the days after September 11th, when we were all terrified, and all of us were certain that the next blow was coming at any moment. And the United States, the people of the United States, as a large group, were demanding to give up their freedoms in return for some sense of security. Search me more often, check here and there. The FBI is going to the library to see what books I've taken out. Well, I've got nothing to fear, and I've got nothing to hide here. We've kind of revisited that now, but in extremes. Take my job away.
Yeah.
Make it impossible for me to feed my family, but give me the possibility of feeling safe. They don't realize, of course, it's a trick. Because once you've broken someone like that, they'll never feel safe. They'll never feel comfortable. You can never take enough away. I mean, until they're wrapped in plastic under the bed with the lights out, and even then, who knows what's under the bed with them, right? There's always going to be another fear. And we saw that play out and eventually tire itself out after 9/11. But unfortunately, we are in the middle of it right now, with people demanding that they be kept from working, and demanding that they not be allowed to go out and buy a cup of coffee or take the dog for a walk. It's quite a world.
Yeah, the lockdown maneuver and the people cheerleading for it, I mean, it's a giant gamble. From where I sit, it looks like it's very possible, and I almost feel like my listeners are going to go, well, duh, you're understating that, but it looks like it's very possible the lockdown's going to cause more harm than good. And I keep thinking some of the worst people in politics in America in my lifetime were probably the people that lied about WMDs in Iraq and got us into a mess that we're still in, basically, decades later. I keep thinking, I wonder if the people pushing lockdowns are going to end up in the same dark corner historically as some of those WMD types.
I'd like to hope so. I'll point out that the people who made those lies about the WMDs walk the streets. Well, they don't; they're locked down. But I mean, theoretically, they walk the streets as free men and women. The ones that have wanted second careers, like Condoleezza Rice, have gone on to have those second careers. The rest of them toy at rehabilitation. George W. Bush, who was the clown at the center of the circus with WMDs. The Democratic Party seems to be flirting with him these days because he's not Trump.
Right.
And I'm afraid that what happens is that the rest of us who got fooled and were afraid, have to rationalize it. In other words, there's to go back, and there's some people will go back and say, hey, I knew it was all a bunch of garbage. I didn't believe any of it. But the majority of Americans did believe it, were frightened by it, and it's cognitively impossible for them, even now, 17 years later, to say, I was lied to and I got fooled because I was scared and I believed what I was told when I was scared. They can't bring themselves to that. And I have this sense that same thing with the lockdown, that the way the package is going to be wrapped is, well, hey, the lockdown wasn't perfect, but hey, look at the results. That's what matters. We're still here. We survived. However many died, less died than would have had we done something different. This power of cognitive dissonance to sort of shape the way we look back at events, and particularly when we ourselves are embarrassed about how frightened we were in retrospect. While we're frightened, of course, it's a different story. But, if you go back and say, hey, come on, man, did you buy, right after 9/11, did you buy plastic and duct tape to close up your windows just in case? Come on, man, admit it. Not very many people are going to say, yeah, I know I did that. I realized it wasn't going to stop poison gas, but I felt better anyway. They're not going to say that. It's cognitive dissonance. And the same thing with the lockdowns. They'll find ways to justify it. And of course, they do have the assistance of the media establishment, which always sides with the rich and the powerful and the people in charge. And so they'll help keep you company on that. I still don't know that we've fully made our peace. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Cold War and having drills where we went under our desks at school, that supposedly to protect us against radiation. I mean, we make fun of that kind of thing a little bit in a mocking way, but we still haven't really made our peace with the fact that we lived like frightened rescue dogs for decades during the Cold War, for a good solid decade after 9/11, and we're working on it again right now.
Yeah, it's that's well put. I got to talk to you as well. You have a brilliant article on Biden, and I mean, again, I read your stuff and I'm like, thank God someone else sees this, because no joke, some of my left-leaning friends on social media naturally are explaining to me and everyone else why this time you don't believe all women. This time, this woman's not credible, okay? This one's different. And just like you list in your article, it's literally the same people that said all of these other things. Diversity is going to be the key to the Democratic victory in 2020. Old white man gets the nominee, probably. The rule of law is ended in America. Trump, there's going to be a giant crash as soon as he's elected. He's going to bomb North Korea. The Covington kids are racist. Literally, these same people said all of this stuff.
They're absolutely shameless. And I speak mostly of the professional media. willing to understand how the average person who kind of follows these events out of the corner of their eye, worried about putting food on the table or keeping the car running, I give them a lot more space here. But when we talk about the professional media and the politicians there, I have no mercy. They have lied to us about things aggressively. Just for convenience sake, we'll go with the last 3 years or so. Certainly we can walk that back. We were just speaking of WMDs, for example, but for the last couple of years, as you pointed out, we've been led from Armageddon to Armageddon to Armageddon. If it wasn't going to be war with the Russians, it was going to be war with Iran or North Korea. And if it wasn't going to be financial collapse because of trade talks with China, it was going to be financial. We can review all this, and it was all garbage. It was all wrong. Every single thing that was said about under the umbrella of Russiagate was a lie. It was wrong. And this came from a professional media class that fetishizes Trump's lies, keeps track of them. Somewhere on the internet, there's a dozen people who will tell you exactly how many 27,414 lies that Trump has told since he took office or what have you. And yet they sort of ignore the fact that the media has pushed lie after lie after lie from the largest scale that Trump is a Russian asset sitting in the Oval Office, down to something small and silly that he wants us all to drink Clorox. Kids, don't drink Clorox. The idea that this is an okay way to be has just found its new home in the case of Tara Reid and Joe Biden. The thing that makes it interesting, hard for me actually in a way, is that when my liberal friends say to me, well, she's just one person, these are accusations, he deserves a day in court, he deserves some due process, blah, 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 blah. This happened in 1993. Why'd she wait so long to tell it? There's no forensic evidence. There were no witnesses. I say, yes.
Yeah.
I sort of agree with you.
Yes.
I agree with all those things. The problem is I was saying those same things about Christy Blasey Ford when you were trying to kill Brett Kavanaugh because he was a bro back in high school 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't listen to me 2 years ago when we said, look, what Brett, there was no witnesses to this thing. It's this woman 50 years later claiming something happened. Why are you giving it the credibility of a DNA test? And you wouldn't listen to me. And now you're making those same arguments in reverse, and you're not getting how hypocritical, silly you sound. At the end of it, it's sad in another way as well, because I think the fact that essentially both sides are agreeing in a way that these victims are unreliable narrators has basically said to the women, we really meant it before when we said just shut up about these things when they happen to you.
Yeah.
It's like we really don't want this to surface. And unfortunately, there are a lot of women who were the victims, the legitimate victims of not celebrity men, if you will, who no one is going to pay any attention to. They're watching this very carefully, and they're saying, well, if I come forward, I'm just going to be treated as the political football of the day, that no one really does care about what happened to me, except to the extent that they can use it for their short-term political aims. And you know what? I just better be quiet about this. That's Joe Biden's legacy, is to have created that, and as the party of women, what the Democratic Party is going to own going forward. Now, a lot of their voters are not going to vote for Trump for a myriad of reasons, but they will stay home. And don't be surprised if in November we have a relatively small turnout that reelects Donald Trump.
Well, since I at last had you here, I've got to tap into your sharp observations of the political landscape, because I think you said that Bernie was going to drop out and endorse Biden. And maybe I read that from you somewhere, and he did. And I have to say, I was a little shocked, and I don't know why. It makes me feel like a naive fool, but I kept thinking, surely he's at least going to keep going till November, or till to the convention. I've never seen such a coordinated effort from an establishment group of people to drop out and endorse one person on the same day.
No, it was pretty impressive. I mean, and it shows that the Democrats did learn a little bit when they basically did the same thing in 2016 to get rid of Bernie and to put all the efforts behind Hillary Clinton. But they did it in 2016 so awkwardly and crudely that they left scars behind. This time, it was pretty sharp and clean and. Pete Buttigieg, remember him? You can Google the name, kids, if you don't remember. And Amy Klobuchar and these others, they just stood up. They reminded me of those old science fiction movies, where the alien possesses the guy and he starts talking in that kind of pseudo robotic voice in the movie, and nobody knows he's possessed because he's just talking like I am told what to say.
Yes.
And the other characters don't know he's possessed by the alien force yet, and we all in the audience know. I mean, that's how I felt watching Buttigieg and Klobuchar and eventually Warren and all the others stand up and pledge their fealty to Joe Biden. It's like, wow, you don't see that they're infected by the alien virus here. Bernie, he to his credit, I mean, he knew the fix was in for the last 4 years, basically.
Yeah.
He tried to fight the fight as far as he could take it, but when it was over, he just threw up his hands and left the room. I give him credit for style points, I guess, in that he didn't say what he really wanted to say about all this, and he's been very quiet since. And he did it with, I think the way an older person sees what they think is a classy ending. But it's a damn shame. I'm sorry I was correct on that prediction. I would have loved to see the Democrats fight it out and produce a coalition candidate through the forge of fighting it out, if you will. But instead, the big hand pulled the curtain shut in the background, and everybody snapped to, and we're now reading these long strings of articles about, well, is there any way we could replace Biden with so-and-so or anything like that? And the answer, of course, is no. Now, the slogan that the Democrats are workshopping is, Biden, he probably won't last the whole term. And that's really a bad way to head into an election. But
yeah, I almost wonder if, you compared a lot of the crazies to your rescue dog. And it almost makes me think, are they freaking out because there is some nervousness? Like, here we are, the last 4 years, we've just drummed up every fear possible. Yeah. And oh my God, we have Joe Biden. What's going to happen to us? And they, of course, now have to say, well, Tara Reade's not credible, because anything that comes up that makes him look bad, it's going to be funny watching them do mental gymnastics trying to explain how mentally fit he is to battle Trump here in a few debates. So you do see him as the nominee. You think he makes it to November? I don't mean he's going to die, but without being replaced.
Yeah, I think absent literally a cardiac event, I think Joe Biden is going to stumble forward to November because the Democrats truly have run out of other options. They had this primary, and not one of their chosen caught any fire at all. To the extent that any of these people reached something along the lines of some national level attention was largely media creations. Oh, a gay guy's running for president. Oh, look, this one's black. Oh, here's a woman going to do this. And these were sort of media inventions, puppets, if you will, where the media kind of seized on the thing of the day and made a big deal. And it lasted as long as it took for these folks to get on a national stage and realize and show us how hollow they were, that they were just chosen because they ticked a particular identity box. And in the end, they had left Joe Biden. It's an indictment of the two-party system. It's an indictment of how much power people like the Clintons had, maybe still have in the party. I mean, take a look at this if you want to talk about that kind of thing. I mean, who's responsible? And the answer, of course, is Barack Obama. Please, I'm willing to bet both kidneys that in 2016, Barack Obama pulled Biden aside and said, Joe, well, let's back up. I'm willing to bet in 2008, Barack Obama pulled Hillary Clinton aside and said, Hillary, get out of my way. I will support you over my vice president's candidate when it's your turn. And here's Secretary of State to keep you busy in the interim. And then in 2016, it was by Barack Obama saying to Joe Biden, Joe, this is not your turn. I'm so sorry, but we're going with Hillary. And there's no question that someone more powerful than Joe Biden, respected throughout the Democratic Party, at least respected for his power, had to step in and tell Buttigieg and the others to back off. That was not Joe Biden who made those calls. It certainly wasn't Bernie Sanders. There's really only one person that could have made those phone calls, and something had to happen. They all dropped out of the race too quickly with their eyes glazed. That's Barack Obama who did that. And you're looking now at the Clintons finally failing enough to have handed the reins over to the next generation, but the next generation is the last generation, Barack Obama, who's promoting the generation before him, Joe Biden. I mean, this is a dysfunctional system, a dysfunctional party, and it's going to yield, whether this is something that causes the audience to cheer or groan, it's going to yield a second term for Donald Trump. I can't imagine what Joe Biden could do or what Donald Trump could do in the negative that would affect things. I mean, we're left with hoping for a heart attack on one side of the equation or some kind of global event that staggers Trump beyond anything that's happened and causes him to slip and fall. He didn't happen with the virus. There's plenty of room to discuss what he did right and what he did wrong, but he didn't slip and fall. He didn't screw it up at some kind of game-changing level. And that opens the way, without any particular opponent in his way, to being reelected in November. So absent, invaders from space, I'm saying that this thing is pretty much over, and it's a shame that it ended the way it did.
Yeah, we'll get you out of here in just a sec. I can only imagine the rescue dog, the fear, all the stuff that they've been pumping out for the last 4 years. If you're correct in November, yeah. Oh my goodness, there is going to be some panics going on in this country.
It will. Well, I mean, the world should know about my doggy Momo. Now, Momo is a Japanese name. I lived in Japan for many years with the State Department. It kind of, if you look it up in the dictionary, it says it means peach, but in this kind of context, it's kind of the equivalent of sweetheart or buttercup or honey bunch, or those kind of words. And she's a real sweetheart, but she is mess. She was mistreated by her previous owners, terrible, terrible things, and she's afraid of everything. And the stuff that she isn't afraid of, she creates new fears for herself all the time. She imagines new fears. Every noise is a potential threat, not just a surprise, but I mean, she tenses up. She's literally afraid of living. And it's a terrible way to be. We're trying to give her a good life and take care of her. Made a little progress maybe, but I've likened Momo to the American populace now. A large portion of us, I don't mean us inclusively, a large portion of us fellow Americans quite literally believe the President of the United States wants to kill them. And that if he isn't going to kill them by releasing lockdowns, he's going to trick them into drinking Lysol and Clorox. I know of no other country in the world where the people of those nations are afraid their leader is trying to kill them. There's countries where they're dissatisfied with the response, angry at their leaders, what have you, but I can't find an example of one where they think their leader is actively trying to kill them, approaching half the population of the United States. That is a horrible way to go through life. Momo wakes up and shivers and cries all day long, and at night she has bad dreams. For me to say that that's what my America has become, a nation that's terrified to literally go out of its house during the day and has nightmares at night about what's to come. That's a terrible place for us to be. And I don't like living there. And I wish there was a fast forward button that brings us past this election so that we can adjust fully to a new reality, whether that is a second Donald Trump term or whether that's another person in the Oval Office. But we can start to kind of collect ourselves again and be the strong nation that we've shown ourselves capable of, instead of the rescue dog that we've become.
Yes, well put. Before we get you out, where can my listeners find your stuff these days?
I'm writing for the American Conservative, theamericanconservative.com, and it's a fascinating website because despite the title, The American Conservative, it covers a fairly broad spectrum of thought, kind of starting near the center and certainly leaning right. Not the other side of the scale, but there's on the right side of the scale, there's a fairly broad spectrum from some pretty hardcore stuff to libertarians, to people who are conservative on a particular topic, but more liberal on others. There's a lot going on there every given day. And if you kind of pick and choose among those of us that are writing there, you can get a pretty good spread of ideas. And though you may not agree with them all, I think you'll find something at least intellectually sound and challenging there on most days. I know I do.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. It's nice to see outlets with diversity of thought, because that's the actual diversity that is fairly interesting.
Yep.
Rather than diversity for diversity's sake. Peter Van Buren, thank you so much for being here once again.
Buck, always a pleasure. Let's do it again soon.
Yes, sir. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you laughed a few times. Peter is such a good guest on this show. I need to start getting him on, maybe every month or so. That'd be great, because he's always got a fun, brilliant insight into whatever topic we want to discuss. So thank you once again, Peter. Let's do that again soon. For you guys listening and you're thinking about joining the Libertarian Party, well, guess what? I got a link for you, lp.org/death2tyrants. If you want to find me on Facebook, you can do that as well, like the page. And it is facebook.com/death2tyrants podcast. I got some new t-shirts. If you guys are interested in one of those, I got two ways to do it. You can write me on Facebook and we'll go ahead and set up the mail order, or you can go leave a review and rating for this show on iTunes. Then send me a screenshot of that and you will be in the mix, and we will do a random drawing and send one of you guys a free t-shirt, Death to Tyrants t-shirt. Twitter, Buck Rebel, @Buck Rebel, BuckRebel. And I've got a Patreon. If you'd like to donate anything, please do. Patreon.com/Death2Tyrants. And I think that's about it. You guys stay sane. I hope this episode helped you at least smile and rid your brain of all the idiocy that you see out there right now in the world. Stay safe, you guys. I will talk to you soon. Have a good one.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Death to Tyrants podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.